Hello and welcome to today's episode Viking Head Home in Porto.
Hello everyone, I'm Sara. I am here from Porto and I have been a certified guide since 2018, working for Viking already for some good few years.
I am Barbara. I'm also from Porto and a certified guide in this city for quite a while. I've been working with Viking for over a decade, and today we will hope that you will come with us and enjoy this visit.
Our goal in this episode is to show you some of the highlights of this marvelous city, UNESCO World Heritage Site, full of history, tradition, and beautiful scenic views.
Come along with us. We hope you enjoy it.
We are here in one of the most iconic parts of Porto, the oldest of the city, the top of the hill that we call Sé, where we find our beautiful cathedral, and right behind me, the statue of one of the forefathers of the nation, a soldier called Vimeira Pérez, that in the 9th century, during the Christian reconquest, was able to come here and expel the Moors, making this a Christian nation. Since that time that we call this land, that today is the north of Portugal, Portugal, that centuries after would become the Kingdom of Portugal. Knowing that the name of our city is the origin of the name of our country makes us, as you can believe, extremely proud. What a beautiful view, isn't it? We are here on the cathedral, and that's why the neighborhood that you are able to see, very old, medieval, is Sé, Sedes Episcopales, which means the throne of the bishop. We are in one of the hilliest parts of Porto, and it's not a coincidence that many civilizations that lived here in what today is our city chose precisely this top to inhabit. As you imagine, the view that we have here from the river is strategic. From a defensive point of view, it was vital for them to be on the top. No surprises. Archaeologists know that this used to be a hill fort since the time of the Romans. Later on, in the 12th century, when we were already a county, the county of Portugal, our leader, Lady Teresa, decided to give the charter of the city to our bishop, Don Hugo, and in 1120, the construction of our cathedral begins in the place where a prior church already existed. This is today one of the crown jewels of the city of Porto. In spite of the fact that the church goes back to the 12th century, the area around it, like this beautiful square, is actually much more recent, made in our 20th century during the regime of Salazar, with the goal of giving the space another monumentality. Here we find buildings like the Bishop's Palace, a Nicolau Nazoni 18th century creation, exhibiting the splendor of the Baroque style. This is a place of reunion and gathering, where tourists visit and locals come for Mass, celebrating the religious past of a city that really belonged to the bishops for almost 300 years. One of the things you're going to notice throughout the city, but especially in the area of the cathedral, is that Porto is in the route of several pilgrimage routes, but no other is as special as the route of Santiago de Compostela. And you're going to find a lot of arrows marked in yellow or scallop shells where the pilgrims can know the right direction to find in Galicia the famous Camino and the Cathedral of St. James the Great. The Cathedral of Porto started to be built in the 12th century, therefore the Romanesque style seen in the solidity of its walls, its buttresses, the lack of big windows, or even the Latin cross shape. But as centuries go by, in a city that never stops evolving, just looking at the church shows us the melting pot of later styles, like the Gothic with its rose window, crenellation, flying buttresses or cloister, or the Baroque with the towers, the niche of Our Lady of the Assumption, and the rich gilding work of its altars. A church as eclectic as the city itself. One of the fun things you can do is adventure yourself in these steep, narrow, winding streets of Sé, where, in the middle of the cobblestone, you will find old traditional houses. A place where families have lived for many generations, with their plants outside, their clothes on the balconies, talking from window to window with their neighbors. Tell me, do you have your good walking shoes on? Look at how picturesque and beautiful these houses are. Normally, always with a symbol of patriotism, with flags of the country or of the football team right there on the windows of the houses. In little squares like this, you still have a lot of the local tradition, like, for example, water fountains that can be easily found in small little alleys of Sé, like the one we're on. Hi, Barbara. What are you doing?
Hello, Sara. I'm drinking some water and washing my hands.
Oh, this is drinkable water.
It is. Yes, it is. So everybody in Portugal has a tap water in their houses and then drink from it. It's very nice and we can trust it.
The neighborhood of Sé, a place where the most traditional way of living and the most modern can join in a beautiful way.
The Battle Square is an iconic and symbolic place in the city of Porto and home to some of the most important buildings in the city. The Battle Square has a historical importance for the city and part of it comes from its name. It is predictable to associate the name of this square to a specific battle, and according to legend, that's exactly what happened in this place in the city of Porto. The name is believed to date back to a bloody battle fought around the 10th century between the Porto inhabitants and the Moors. It is also here that one can find the National Theatre of St. John, and it has its origin in a first building that dates back to the end of the 18th century with the name Royal Theatre of St. John. It was the first building built from scratch in the city, intended exclusively for the presentation of shows. In 1908, the building was destroyed by a fire. It was rebuilt and inaugurated in 1920. It is an imposing construction inspired by the French models of the time. In this square was also the scene of other historical events, such as the end of the Northern Monarchy around 1919 or the revolt of the Liberal Republican forces in 1927. In Battle Square we can find, since about 150 years ago, the statue of King Peter V, who died very young after a short reign. He was a king who did not hesitate to visit and greet the sick and the poor in person, and maybe that cost him his life. But that is also why he always remained a monarch held in high esteem by his subjects. It was in 1862 that the first stone for the construction of this statue was laid by order of the city council, but only in 1866 was the statue finally inaugurated in the presence of King Louis, his brother. The Church of Saint Ildefonso has about 11,000 classic blue and white tiles on the facade and on the sides of the bell towers. These tiles depict scenes from the life of Saint Ildefonso and from the Gospel. They were only placed in 1931, but the construction of the church is much older. It began in 1709 and was 30 years under construction. Inside, there are 8 stained glass windows and an altarpiece in Baroque and Rococo wood carving from the first half of the 18th century. In the choir area, there is a pipe organ from the early 19th century. The church also has traces of an old cemetery discovered during the sidewalk restoration work done in 1996. It was from the church's staircase that in 1891 the shots were fired that would end the revolution that was the first attempt to establish the Republic in Portugal. And here, one of the most beautiful and iconic facades of Porto, the Art Nouveau of Café Majestic. The history of this café is closely linked to the gatherings of writers and artists of this city during the Belle Époque, being one of the most representative examples of Art Nouveau in the city. It was once considered one of the most beautiful cafés in the world. St. Catherine Street is the most important commercial area in Porto. This pedestrian-only street in the upper part of the city starts at Battle Square with almost 1.5 kilometers length, around 1 mile. Besides being an emblematic street of Porto, this is also the home of some of the most iconic and historical sites of the city, like the Grand Hotel of Porto. Opened in 1880, is the oldest and one of the most prestigious Victorian-style hotels in the city.
In the city center, halfway between the main avenue, the commercial areas, and the riverfront, we find Porto's most central train station, São Bento. Its history is very interesting. In this place, centuries back, there used to be a Benedictine feminine monastery called São Bento de Ave Maria. In 1834, after the Portuguese Liberal War started a time of persecution of the religious orders in the country, with the expulsion of all masculine and feminine religious members, and the consequent expropriation of their property. Being this monastery feminine though, the confiscation of the building by the state could only happen after the death of the last religious member, which only happened in 1892, delaying all future projects for the area. Famous Portuguese architect Marques da Silva, a local man, was in charge of the project of a new and central train station in the fashionable French Beaux-Arts style of the time. The station started to work temporarily in 1896 with the arrival of the first train and was finally inaugurated in 1916, keeping, ironically, the same name that the monastery had, Saint Benedict, São Bento. And the most famous feature is not outside and inside, with the most amazing 20,000 tiles. Reputed painter Jorge Colasso, a specialist in azulejo, the Portuguese word for glazed tile, is called to decorate the inside of this train station with his outstanding work. In a little over a decade, Colasso and his team produce an impressive 20,000 tiles, all made by hand and individually, that made this building world famous. Acclaimed internationally as one of the most beautiful train stations in the world, you just can't miss this visit. From panels that reveal important historical moments related to the independence of Portugal, to religious processions in the Douro Valley, scenes of the wine-making process, or the transport of port wine in barrels in the old traditional Rabelo boats. A day in agriculture and the windmills, all the way to a short evolution of the transports or the ancient alliance with Britain. Here there is a little bit of everything. Inside this gorgeous train station and in the middle of such beautiful creations, the blue and white tiles still allow for a very special panel to draw our attention. This was probably one of the most famous historical characters to ever be born in the city of Porto. Henry the Navigator, the famous prince and sailor that encouraged the dream of the overseas experience that led Portugal to the empire and the glorious discoveries. Look at him in this lower panel in the famous conquest of Ceuta, Morocco, 1415, the beginning of the Portuguese maritime adventures, holding the flag in what would be the beginning of a beautiful dream. Just look at the ceiling. The words Douro and Minho, the east and the north destination of most of these trains. And let's wrap this up with the last panel showing you a popular festivity in the north of the country. Are you ready to come here and visit? Isn't it worth it? Even outside the station, you have beautiful churches covered in blue and white tiles, like this one, the Congregados. They are literally everywhere in the city.
An important meeting place for visitors and residents is the Allies Avenue. On the north side, we have the City Hall, bearing great similarities to the palaces of northern France and Flanders. The City Hall building was officially inaugurated in 1957. It stands out for the robust granite, the high central tower, and the Carillion clock. The avenue is the heart of the city. It is part of a profound architectural and urban modernization designed and implemented in the 20th century. It was considered for many decades as the Boulevard of Porto. The greatness of its architectural ensemble and its central character makes it the living room of the city, a place par excellence where the people of Porto gather to celebrate special moments and the stage on many occasions of artistic exhibitions and music concerts. The original name was Allied Nation Avenue, a tribute to the Allied nations of World War I. It is a magnificent avenue, flanked by several imposing granite buildings, many of them crowned with lanterns and domes, with a classical and eclectic style. These are home to the headquarters of important banks, insurance companies, municipal services, luxury hotels, and historical cafes, the meeting place for politicians and writers. One of the best-known buildings houses what is considered the most beautiful McDonald's in the world. The choice is from the American magazine Business Insider. Opened in 1995 and reopened in 2008 with a new image, this restaurant presents a contemporary and at the same time historical decoration. According to those responsible, the company preserved the historical heritage of the 1930s building where the emblematic Imperial Cafe used to be. It kept the building's facade, the imposing bronze eagle, and the name Imperial. Inside, the bar ceiling made of frosted glass and crystal and a stained glass window. On the south side, Liberty Square. Despite its small size, it hosts in the center the monument to King Peter IV, first Emperor of Brazil. It is an equestrian statue inaugurated in 1866, a city tribute to the liberal king and hero of the Liberal War. At the base, the monument illustrates two important moments in the city's history: the landing of Peter's troops north of Porto during the Liberal War against his brother for the throne of Portugal, and on the other side, the handing over of the king's heart to the city's representatives after his death, as a demonstration of gratitude for the people's loyalty.
Porto is known for its beautiful churches, and once here, you have to visit the Clérigos neighborhood. The name comes from the famous church and tower that was built by a religious order called Clérigos, the Brotherhood of the Poor Clergymen, back in the 18th century. In an area right outside the old medieval wall, today with beautiful houses, cafes, and shops. The tower, a city's landmark, is a masterpiece of the Italian artist Niccolao Nasoni, standing imponent with its 250 feet, a highlight of the Baroque architecture that allows one of the best views of the city. A town of fearless bishops, this area of Porto used to be called Olival, the olive garden. Therefore, the beautiful olive trees you find in this fantastic rooftop, where people love to sunbathe and stop for a drink. Right here, where once a city market used to operate. Today, one of the most bohemian and cultural parts of the city, it is here that you find the headquarters of the University of Porto, Reitoria, this beautiful neoclassic white building right in front of you. But also mesmerizing gardens like the Cordoaria area or fantastic exhibition places like the Portuguese Center of Photography, today working in the building of the old city prison. What in the past was a place of merchants, the Cordoaria area is transformed into a marvelous public garden in the 19th century. Some of its centennial trees survived through hurricanes, like these original, strangely shaped sycamore trees that instigate the curiosity of all the passbyers. Look at the marvelous statuary of the garden, like these contemporary sculptures of laughing men, just brightening our day. Just look at this building in Neo-Palade style by John Carr, our current St. Anthony's Hospital. Area of students and young people, little cozy buildings host cafes, restaurants, and guest houses, where people gather for a drink during the day or by night. The two churches, Carmo and Carmelitas, are an attraction for everyone for their exuberant facades and beautiful interiors. But also, look at the center, the most narrow building in the city, the Hidden House. Or this mesmerizing wall with a panel of blue and white tiles by Silvestri, which is definitely one of the showstoppers of this neighborhood. In front of the university, a famous 19th century water fountain, precious for the active academic rituals of the students of the city, and with famous griffins that, word has it, could have inspired great and recent literary bestsellers. We are home of one of the most beautiful bookstores in the entire world, Mello. With an exquisite neo-Gothic facade by José Billman, this 1906 bookstore, created by the brothers Lello, is truly amazing. Considered one of the most impressive and beautiful in the planet, Lello is visited daily by hundreds of people that want to see its famous intertwined serpent staircase, its dazzling stained glass ceilings, the Art Nouveau decoration inside, and overall the precious details both in wood and plaster. It's magical.
Arriving close to the riverfront to explore the neighborhood of Ribeira, we can see this beautiful square where the statue of Tomás Costa shows us a man pointing to the ocean, our dear local Henry the Navigator, the prince responsible for the big adventure overseas that led to the Portuguese discoveries and the vast empire. On the right-hand side, what a beautiful neoclassic building, the Chamber of Commerce that we call Palácio da Bolsa, built in the 19th century for the merchants and traders of our city in what was the old Franciscan convent that burned down during the siege of Porto. And right by the Chamber of Commerce, the Institute of Port Wine, and the beautiful glass and red iron building that is Mercado Ferreira Borges, an old city market that meanwhile has turned into one of the concert rooms of our beloved city.
Ribeira is one of the oldest and typical areas in the city, part of the historical center of Porto, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Today is full of lively cafes and restaurants ready to welcome you to this part of the old port. Rebelo boats are moored along the shore and there are splendid views to the other side where Vila Nova de Gaia is.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi,
What
Sara.
a beautiful river, isn't it?
Absolutely gorgeous.
It's the Douro, right?
It is the Douro River, worldwide known for so many things.
I have heard that Viking has some incredible cruises on this river.
They do. They do have 4 Viking vessels here on the Douro, and they are always full of guests. From my experience, because I work for Viking for such a long time now, guests come here and are delighted with not only the journey itself, with the sights, with gastronomy, with the wines that all this area can give them. Well, this is a 7-day cruise and absolutely one of the most beautiful ones that Viking has to offer. Behind me, we have one of the 6 bridges that connects Porto to Gaia. This is Louis I bridge, being Louis one of the kings of Portugal. It was built in the 19th century and was built with tons and tons of iron. It has 2 levels, 2 decks, the upper one being for pedestrians and the metro, and the lower one meant for cars. Well, this is one of the 6 bridges. We have 6 in total, and very soon there will be a 7th one.
The Ribeira Square. With its origins in medieval times, it was here that the Porta da Ribeira, the Ribeira entrance, was located, the most important door at the time because it was the one that allowed access to the Douro River. The square was the scene of great commercial activity, playing the role of market during several periods. In the 18th century, the square was reformulated. The west side was rebuilt with neoclassic style facades, contrasting with those on the east side of traditional and popular style. This square is commonly known as Cube Square, since this famous sculpture was placed in the center of the square in 1984 on top of a 17th century fountain. On the north side stands the monumental fountain of St. John. In the niche of the fountain there is a sculpture of St. John the Baptist representing the popular festivity of St. John. This festivity in Porto is a landmark in the life of the town, bringing together thousands and thousands of tourists and visitors who participate in the various initiatives that take place over the course of a month or so all over the city. The high point of these festivities is the night from the 23rd to the 24th of June. That night, the city is transformed, with the streets filled with people, colors, and joy. As tradition dictates, sardines are grilled in every corner of the town. The music is loud and there is no lack of animation. To finish the decoration of the streets, the traditional St. John balloons made out of paper and in various colors decorate the main streets. Other, big ones, are launched, painting the sky with hundreds of points of light. At midnight, there are fireworks launched from the Douro River, and the banks of the Douro are filled with people to watch this show. Hello, good afternoon. May I ask what you're having for lunch?
Estamos a comer francesinha típica do Porto.
Oh, francesinha, a sandwich filled with beef, sausages. On top, you have a fried egg, cheese, everything covered with a special sauce, a secret one. On the side, you always have French fries. It looks amazing and delicious.
With a beautiful view.
Now we are in Vila Nova de Gaia, and people from Porto, say that the Vila Nova de Gaia has two wonderful things. One is the wine, port wine, but the other one are the views to this beautiful city. You can realize what a postcard one can have from here, Gaia, to Ribeira in Porto. Of course, these two cities, they do have a thing in common, and this thing is the Douro River. This river has its source in Spain, in the region of Soria, with more than 900 kilometers, a little bit less than 600 miles of length. This river ends its journey right here at Foz do Douro, the river mouth here in Porto and Gaia. Throughout this river, we have the World Heritage Site, the Douro Valley. It was considered like this not only because it gives us this nectar of the gods, which is the port wine, but because it has stunning views, breathtaking ones. And once you board your Viking ship, you will see for yourself what I'm saying. It is in the Douro Valley that the grapes are produced. There are different types of grapes which are used to produce the port wine. Centuries before, we used to have these old cabelo boats, these wooden boats used to transport the barrels full of port wine till here, Vila Nova de Gaia, where the wine cellars are located. Well, why in Gaia? Because Gaia has the perfect conditions to store and age this beautiful wine, the port wine. Throughout the centuries too, they used to have a tough journey. You cannot even imagine how hard it was to sail these small wooden boats down the river from the upper Douro Valley till here in the mouth of the river Douro.
And tell me something, Barbara.
Yes.
Are you going to take us to the wine cellars?
Would you like me to?
Of course.
Why not? So come along. And as promised, Sara, here we are in one of the most famous wine cellars of Porto. Well, Gaia, I should say, right? This is one of the dozens of port wine cellars that exist here in this area. Some of them are open for visitors, and that is where we can taste the delicious port wine. Red, ruby, tawny, white one, you choose. And Sandman is no doubt one of them.
What a great ride this was. Don't you think, Barbara?
I do, Sarah. This was a great journey. We hope that you have enjoyed as much as we did.
We showed you a little bit of our city, but we are waiting for you here, in person.
We are looking forward to welcome you in Porto.
And what better way to end this than with a delicious glass of port wine. Cheers.
Saúde!
Delicious.